Hello, in this video I'm going to talk through the section C of paper 1E, which is Russia Lenin to Yeltsin, which is all about the interpretations on the collapse of the USSR. So the structure for the video is as follows, that I'm going to just highlight the specification for this area, then I'm going to go through a revision idea, and then a reminder of the structure for section C, the interpretations questions for paper 1, and then the suggested approach, and then I'm going to do a walkthrough of a past paper question. This video was requested by somebody, so I hope it's useful to people who are studying this paper, or just generally if you are doing edXL A-level history in preparation for paper 1, you can see the kind of general technique here as well. I have done a video going through paper 1 interpretations technique, which I'll link to in the description. So here's the specification for this part of the paper. It's always going to be about the reasons for the collapse of the USSR, 1985 to 1991. And you can see there's 4 bullet points. So the first one is all about economic weakness and failure of reform. The second bullet point is all about Gorbachev's failure and his reforms. The third bullet point is about nationalist resurgence in Eastern European countries. And the final bullet point is about the kind of personal failures of Gorbachev and Yeltsin. So the way that I would suggest revising this and other paper 1 section C topics is this kind of thing, where you've got a grid and you put each bullet point from the specification in the left-hand column, and then you just put evidence for and against each of these bullet points in the grid. So it allows you to kind of engage with the arguments and weigh up kind of for and against each of these kind of ideas. Obviously, there's going to be overlap, and in some of these grids, in some of these boxes, there might be more information than others, but it will just give you a sense of the kind of the argument and the balance of the arguments. Just a quick recap of the structure for paper 1 section C questions. So my suggested structure is you don't need to do an intro, 2 internal paragraphs and a conclusion. And the internal paragraphs, basically what you're doing is you are engaging with the arguments of the extracts, picking out key quotes, and then using your own knowledge to weigh up the arguments, and then reaching a judgment within and at the end of each paragraph on how convincing the extracts are. So that's the key word with these questions, how convincing. So try and make those judgments within the paragraphs as well as at the end of each paragraph as a kind of overall summary. And then finally, in your conclusion, you answer the question, you say which extract was most convincing, and try and set out why the extracts differ, which is usually to do with the focus or the scope. What are they focusing on, or which time period are they focusing on, which would be, I would consider, kind of scope. And also maybe you can kind of discuss the relative merits. So even if one extract is less convincing than the other, it can still be useful at highlighting a certain area. So as I said, I have got a video on this. If you want to check out that video, which goes into much more detail on the technique for this, this type of question, have a look at the description and I'll put a link to it there. In terms of the approach, again, this is something I talk through in much more detail in the other video, but basically reading through each extract, highlighting key quotes, thinking about own knowledge to support or challenge the extracts, and then thinking about why the extracts differ. What I would say is that you need to find an approach that works for you. This is what I suggest, but getting into good habits as you prepare for the exams, so that with every interpretations question, you know what you're going to do. You follow the same process, the same routine as you do in your revision, as you do it in the exam, so that it really just helps you almost on kind of autopilot do those key things that you know to help you plan in the exam. So here's the past paper question. It's from 2019, and the question is, in the light of differing interpretations, how convincing do you find the view that the USSR collapsed in 1991 because of a nationalist resurgence in the Soviet bloc? So if we go back to the specification, we can see this is clearly focusing on the third bullet point, okay? Which is why, you know, if you've revised like this, you should have good knowledge of this, this issue. So The USSR collapsed because of a nationalist resurgence in the Soviet bloc. So with these questions, as I'm sure everybody knows who's watching this video at this point, you get two extracts and you need to identify what's the overall argument of each extract, what are the key quotes, and then to what extent does it match your own knowledge. So I'm not going to read through this in full. You can pause the video and do that. Extract 1 is from Catherine Merridale. And basically what Catherine Merridale is arguing in this extract is that it was the nationalist discontent which was kind of undermining the cohesion of the Soviet Union. And that Gorbachev was kind of partly responsible for that, but this kind of was kind of almost beyond his control, and it was something that he could no longer control, and it led ultimately to the collapse of the USSR. Okay, so that's what Catherine Merridale is focusing on. In extract 2, Archie Brown is making a similar point, but the difference here is really that it's saying that it's Gorbachev's reforms. And if we look at the line 21 to 24, it says the USSR could have been held together for many more years had he not embarked on the liberalization of the Soviet economy, the democratization of the Soviet political system, and the transformation of Soviet foreign policy. So what this is, it's saying it does talk about nationalism, but it really identifies this reforming approach from Gorbachev as the key to the collapse of the USSR. And this kind of leads to people demanding independence. So with the first one, Catherine Merridale is focusing on kind of nationalism, kind of solely on nationalism. Whereas the second one is talking about Gorbachev's reforms and the kind of impact that had. So I hope that is a useful run through, and it'll give you a sense of how to identify the key arguments and an idea for revision. And that will be my approach, just to try and identify the overall argument. What are the key quotes? And then what does your own knowledge tell you about how convincing they are? Does it support or challenge the arguments in the extracts? Okay, thank you for listening.